and welcome to the program Balkans in Europe. My name is Ivana Dragicevic.
And I'm Borjan Jovanovski.
The European Union finds itself in the midst of multiplying crises. Increasing lack of unity caused by an inability to overcome divisions and reach consensus is becoming much more evident in the Union's dealings. And the support of EU integration, in spite of this, in the Western Balkans countries still remains high, and its people still perceive the European Union as a major source for reforms leading to a better life.
However, the state of play in the EU hinders tension in the region and insecurity that eventual accession could be stalled indefinitely. Can Western Balkans EU members' neighbors be advocates for pushing the enlargement issue, insisting on the process of democratization, or will be the old bilateral issue stand in a way?
To discuss this with us today, we have Mr. Zoran Nechev from the Institute for Democracy, Societas Civilis from Skopje. He's a researcher there. Welcome to our program. And we have our two distinguished MPs, Mr. Georgi Pirinski from Bulgaria and Mr. Ivo Weigl from Slovenia. Welcome to the program Balkans in Europe.
Welcome.
So, Mr. Nechev, you wrote a paper named Reinstating EU Transformative Power in the Western Balkans, few of its elements we heard in the introduction. So, is it possible to push enlargement process higher on EU agenda in times of several crises we're witnessing?
I have named my paper Reinstating because I think that the point of departure of the paper is that the accession process has become very bureaucratized and very technical. Somehow in the process the EU has forgotten to Europeanize the countries. Its overall objective, the general aim of the EU enlargement process is to Europeanize the countries. I locate my argument in times when there are multiple crises in Europe. We have the migrant crisis, the financial crisis, now Brexit. But as we can see, in spite of all of these crises, still the citizens of Western Balkans perceive the EU as a motor of reforms in our countries. So how to reinstate? I think that in order to bolster the enlargement policy, I think that the whole approach should be changed. The elements are there, the new approach is there, the new methodology introduced by Commission is there. So the elements are there, but the whole framework should be changed.
So these elements are
let's ask the member of the European Parliament, is there any enlargement on the agenda of the European Union, having in mind all difficult circumstances in which the European Union is facing?
And do you think that this new approach, it means that the new countries are starting with chapters 23 and 24 is a better way than it was before, for example, in the cases of Croatia or Bulgaria and Romania earlier? Mr. Weigl, Mr. Pirinski.
We just had a debate on the common European security and foreign policy in the AFET Committee for Foreign Affairs. And I announced an amendment which would include the enlargement policy as one of the priorities of European Union. Now it was missing in this paper, but then we had a short debate and where it was obvious that the majority or almost everybody in the committee is supporting it. So I would say the importance of enlargement process has not lost its attractivity. It is still a priority of European Union, but somehow the edges of the issue are a little bit shaky because if we are only speaking about the enlargement with the countries of Western Balkans, then practically there is no objection. Everybody considers this a core part of European Union, and we should, in this respect, always keep in mind that the enlargement and European Union is still a project of peace, how to secure the peace everywhere in our continent. But the issue of enlargement has got another dimension, and this is more problematic, namely what to do with the countries who are having some relations with the European Union, but are not on European continent.
What about, I mean, everybody say that the future of Western Balkans in European Union, but nobody can say that it will happen in a foreseeable future. Am I right, or?
Well, you know, I have a bit of a different approach to the question of putting enlargement back on the agenda higher up. I feel that there is a window of opportunity now in this respect if enlargement is integrated into the effort of solving the crisis of the European Union itself. Now, just last week in Strasbourg, we adopted a very important resolution on reindustrialization having to do with the experiences of Caterpillar and Alstom, two large factories that are supposed to be closed down. Now, if the Commission and the European Union really wants to give people in the Western Balkan countries the sense that they are being included in the plans of the Union for tomorrow, there should be this inclusion of the countries themselves in what is being demanded of the Commission, a new industrial strategy.
The question is, do they really want?
They who? The Commission?
European Commission, as you mentioned.
You'll have to ask the Commission. We have to press them, because this is a question of solving the crisis in the European Union itself. Because as you see, you said that people in the Western Balkans view the European Union as a source of democratization. I think they see it as a place to go and work for 3 or 4 times more pay than they get at home. And the whole question is to give the people in these countries the sense that they are participating in a joint effort with the European Union in building a 21st century economy for the European Union, which is competitive, which is socially engaged, and which gives them a life that they want to live in their countries.
Is it doable if we look at the countries of the Western Balkans and their inner reforms? Is the so-called 3 pillars approach of European Commission consisting the first rule of law and democratic governments and administrative reform, is it something that's going to work?
These 3 pillars for me are only one leg, the 3 of them together. If you don't have another leg to stand on, which is economic growth and connectivity, which the Commission mentions, but somehow it comes if and only.
I very much agree with colleague.
I'm happy
yes,
to hear
very
that.
much so. I think we reduced the issue on democratization, and sometimes the democratization is just a kind of
But basically, the rule of law is the basics for the economy, for the investments.
We have a problem
rule of law,
with
you cannot invest without the framework,
countries,
legal framework.
We're not forgetting that. But talking only about the framework without the substance doesn't make much sense.
Mr. Nechev, what's your judgment about the strategy so far of the European Commission towards the enlargement? Let's take a case of Macedonia. Despite several efforts of the high-level dialogue and different form of rapprochement towards Macedonia, the situation, I mean, we know the situation is very bad right now, as it is.
Yeah, first, just to mention that in the enlargement strategy of 2013, economic strengthening, economic governance is part of the enlargement criteria. So, and it's based on what is in the EU, the European semester.
That's nice. Yeah.
Related to Macedonia and the enlargement process, this is one of the solutions that I offer in the paper. If the process does not go further and you start opening chapters, closing chapters, then if you're stalled, then whatever you do, it will not, whatever reforms, painful, expensive reforms you do, does not in the end finish with some kind of a reward, opening a session negotiation, then the countries go inwards. Once they go inwards, they focus on themselves without having the competition with the other countries in mind. Once they go inwards, they start, digging some holes that were closed for a long time. So this is why I offer that the Commission should start. It's a bit utopian, but I think it's very important to mention that the Commission should start accession negotiation with all the countries of the Western Balkans. The Commission will return its leverage on EU countries. It will return its credibility on one side. Still, the countries will be judged based on their merits, and still the member states will have control over the process by blocking or unblocking new chapters.
Do you think that obstacle imposed by the other countries, neighbors, let's say, could be just an argument, a justification for the governments for the lack of the reform processes within the framework of the rule of law?
And not only that, but the confusing, let's say, statements that the political elites in the Western Balkans are receiving from the EU gives them enough maneuverable space not to do actual reform, not to do sustainable reforms. They're more superficial. This is why once you open accession negotiation, then, it restricts your maneuverable space. You cannot maneuver. You have to implement reforms. You are in the negotiation process. You cannot say, but I'm blocked by another country. I have bilateral issue with this country or that. Or whatever I do, in the end, Greece will block us not to open accession negotiations. So this is why it is important in this post-Brexit era, when the EU is discussing about the defense union, a financial union, political union, also to have a new concept, a new framework for enlargement, introducing accession negotiation with all the countries of the Western Balkans.
Mr. Weigl, speaking about the question of new security foreign policy agenda, you said that you've put enlargement as an amendment, basically, and that everybody agreed that Western Balkans should be inside of this. But is there kind of a risk of trade-off between democratization, security in this framework of new events in Europe and around Europe?
Well, I am returning back to the idea my colleague said. It is basically important that we still focus on the instrument of democratization and the functioning governance, also institutional framework of a democratic country. But we should enlarge our expectations and our dialogue with the candidate countries. We should be supportive in their economic planning. I think we should support some ambitious infrastructural projects. Everybody is talking about the highways and train, etc.
But we have a Berlin process which
but very little is happening in this regard. So I think it should be a more holistic approach to this. And I also agree with you. This is my idea. I expressed it already in this round, maybe some years ago. I think it would be very smart and strategically important if European Union would enlarge and with a package of the countries and treat them on equal terms. So I don't see any added value in these differentiations between countries. You can judge them on their own merits. Also, if you say, okay, we need this part of Europe to be integrated in European Union.
But how can you judge Macedonia in these circumstances which Borjan mentioned? How can you judge Bosnia and Herzegovina when you had the issue with the Dodik and the referendum and with the continuously instability signals coming from it? So how can you judge it as a package concerning all the things happening around us and inside the EU, Mr. Pirinski?
Irrespective of all these problems, there is a common crisis throughout the region, a crisis of employment, a crisis of social progress. So what I am saying is that despite all these very acute political challenges, There has to be a new approach, a new look to the area, making a map of what is there at the moment. How can it be integrated into a pan-European industrial
Who can be
vision?
inventor of this new map? Should it come inside, because inside of the region there's no, I think, capacity for it, or the EU neighbors of the Western Balkans, as, I don't know, Slovenia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania, Greece can be in that?
This resolution, which I mentioned we passed last week, there is a direct demand to the Commission to start preparing such a strategy for European Union. And that is why I think that there is this window of opportunity. Part of this strategy should be saying, wait a minute, we have immediate neighbors where there is quite substantial human resource, people with high qualification that have been out of work for years. There is substantial industrial plant which can be thought of, and there is the prospect of a new industrial revolution. You see, just saying that, okay, there has to be economic development as well, does nothing. There has to be a real hands-on approach. And if we talk about resources, just let me say one more thing. You have the European Investment Bank. You have the Juncker Plan, which will be doubled. Now is the time to see how do we direct money precisely to those areas of the European Union and the adjacent.
Balkan countries are not applicable for Juncker.
But they have to expand, and they have to think of outside of the Union what they're doing. Now they're doing 10% in the usual EIB program.
Something as an EU fund for Africa, which was...
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Let me play the role of the people from the European Commission.
Please
they will
go
say
ahead.
how to put the money there when we have a problem with the governments who don't respect the basic principles of rule of law.
Okay.
With such a high level of corruption and organized crime.
Let me pick up another idea I think Mr. Nechev has in his paper. Going to society, going to the social partners, going to those sectors of society that are interested in restarting the economy. And pressing the governments and saying, look at what the European Union is doing. No more tax fraud. No more, Panama Papers and I don't know what. You have to pay your taxes and bring the pressure, again, of what is happening in Europe to these, governments that are not performing.
How to reach this point? What could be the lessons learned?
Mr. Nechev has to think a bit more creatively.
From the rapprochement till now to arrive at that stage.
Yeah, I think that, and what I have written in the paper is, in order to preserve the rule of law and promote, let's say, democratization effort, we need to change a bit this top-down approach. Just going to the government as a main interlocutor of the Commission in the process.
Explain it, please. Yeah.
This is essential. We need to empower other groups. So we need broad societal mobilization in the society. Broad societal mobilization in order to promote the EU agenda, in order to preserve rule of law, in order to Europeanize this society. So you need to empower different social groups like civil society. You need media, let's say academia, youth. You need to create, I call them Europeanization hubs.
Mr. Kukan, Mr. Weichel is playing on the ground. Why do you agree with this, or you will say, well, we do so?
I can say also we are doing that, and we are having the dialogue with the civil society all the time. Now I'm talking about the case of Macedonia, where I was involved quite a lot of time, and this afternoon we have a conference with the representatives of the civil society from Macedonia, and so it is with Serbia and other countries. So, but it is easy to agree with you. The society has to be involved. The citizens have to be involved in all the processes and transformation of the states. Now, are we successful in our own countries? Do the civil society organization decide upon the German, French, Italian, governmental politics, they don't. So we can speak about what would be good, what would be more democratic model of governance, and sure, it should be more direct democracy, but to wait for the candidate countries to transform before the general awareness is there in the developed countries, it would be quite illusionistic, I would say.
Could I just point out again the experience of Caterpillar, because my colleague was saying, are we doing it in our countries? What happened? The workers refused to close the factory. Our colleagues from the European Parliament got in touch with them. The government of Belgium got involved. They organized themselves to keep the enterprise going. They came to Parliament, and they were one of the factors for the resolution that was passed. So it's perfectly possible to engage directly those sectors that are directly concerned with their livelihood and support them with every means possible.
So now the question is why we don't do so.
Because there is this very different, very formalized approach of the acquis, the chapters, the 3 pillars, etc., etc.
I would just add that they are empowering these groups, but they're doing it really, let's say, approximately 1% goes of EPA funds goes to civil society.
Well, that's pretty clear.
It should be 50-50
You see the figures. Okay.
It doesn't have to go 50-50, but imagine what could happen in these societies if you boost the civil society, the academia, the media,
Business.
in order the businesses
exactly.
to promote the European values. How obviously the governments are not doing such a good job in pursuing their own people that the European idea is there. If political elites from the region start looking at, not to mention now, but if they look at Hungary and what is going in Hungary as a member of the European Union, this is the way how you change the picture about the European Union. So this is why you need to engage with the civil society. In most likely situation, they will even create the Europeanization effect, not waiting for the EU to promote it.
So just for the end, the question of EU neighbors of the Western Balkans, Slovenia, Croatia, Bulgaria, Romania went through its own experiences.
Greece, of course.
So, would Bulgaria and Greece be still the obstacle for Macedonia, for example, or I don't know, Croatia will be for Serbia, as Slovenia and Croatia had its own bilateral issues, or we all can be proactive towards Western Balkans?
Well, very shortly, if it's a question of the Republic of Macedonia, Bulgaria has proposed a bilateral treaty of good neighborly relations, and we have always supported the accession of the Republic of Macedonia.
But in general?
There are those issues which we want to be quite clear, that we observe the standards of good neighborliness to the full, and then there's no problem.
Well, I think it is the most dangerous thing in the Western Balkans is still nationalism. And in all these objections and criticism of the neighbors from both sides, there is too much of anachronistic nationalism. And once we really have also in Europe to say a word about it. Because it is becoming rather dangerous and boring. It is boring now for several years already. Now we have again an unacceptable discourse between Serbia and Croatia. I don't want to raise the issue of Greeks, and I think also in Bulgaria should be calm in this debate. There is too much of the pressure towards Macedonia. I must tell, I'm not very happy sometimes when the Bulgarian members of the parliament raise the historic issues. Historic issues should be dealt with on the level of the academics and the historians, not on the level of the current hardcore politics. I'm very glad that Bulgaria has supported Macedonia, recognized under the historic name, etc. Should proceed with it. I don't think that it is a good to side the Greece in exerting pressure on Macedonia.
Those
I
are
know that you will not
voices.
like it, but
no. Those are individual voices.
Yeah.
That's not the position of Bulgaria as the state.
Mr. Necho, for conclusion.
For conclusion, I think that once you provide a framework of negotiation with tangible incentives, rewards for overcoming such an issue, you will create a political will and pressure by the EU to resolve these issues. Look at the example with Macedonia and the border issues. Now we have demarcated all the border lines with all the neighbors. Why? Because it was one of the criteria for the visa liberalization process. So it's always about the framework and it's always about the incentives given. If there is a right incentive, then any bilateral question can be resolved. Yeah. Look at the behavior of Vučić. Vučić is not supporting Dodik in this moment. Why? Because he is in the negotiation framework. He cannot do that, at least publicly. He cannot do that, at least publicly.
It's time for close-up.
So we'll see what the incentives will be. Thank you all for being our guests today. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been watching another Balkans in Europe program. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
We are another.